Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks so much for being here with us on this Friday afternoon. Maybe it's a Friday night where you are, or maybe even a Saturday morning, but as we like to say, wherever you are, we're glad you're here with us. Thanks for taking the time to be here with us. Jimmy Akin, both hours, and something that lots and lots of people really enjoy. We got weird questions for Jimmy Akin. A lot of people, some normal, some perhaps weird themselves. I do not know. But the questions are weird, and people love to ask Jimmy weird questions, and they get them to him all different ways. These were sent by email and various other electronic means of communication. Sometimes people send them to us here at the studio, and we send them on to Jimmy, and he collects them up, and we do weird questions. So we've got 2 hours of fun. Jimmy answering weird questions for us today. I'll try not to give out the phone number. If I do, just ignore me because it's a mistake if I do. Jimmy Akin is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. That's important, but you should also know he's the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which that's where most people know of him dealing with, well, not always weird, but a lot of weird phenomena over there. Jimmy Akin, welcome.
Hello, Psych Hellet. How you doing?
I am doing really good. I'm really good today. Thank you, Jimmy. You're probably the best known Catholic apologist willing to deal with weird things. I don't know any other Catholic apologists that have that reputation.
Well, I always have felt that questions deserve answers, and so
Yeah.
I'll give a straight answer to the best of my ability to any question I'm asked, no matter what its nature is, even if it's weird.
And you and I were both fans as kids of a show that Leonard Nimoy hosted, In Search Of.
In Search Of,
So
yes.
you're carrying on that kind of tradition.
Yes, indeed. Only applying Catholic principles to it.
Oh, yeah. Right. Again, it's weird questions with Jimmy Akin. I'll be reading them. And so you don't need to call today. Call another day, but just enjoy the questions and answers today. I'm going to just get right to a question. Justin said this: I hope this email finds you well. I am a longtime admirer of your work in Catholic apologetics and your thoughtful approach to complex questions. I have a hypothetical theological question inspired by the movie Groundhog Day that I'd love to hear your perspective on. In the film, Phil Connors is trapped in a time loop, reliving February 2nd repeatedly with only his memory carrying over each day. From a Catholic perspective, if someone in a real-life time loop committed sins during earlier iterations of the loop, but then they broke the cycle waking up on February 3rd, would they need to confess the sins for the previous loops? Since the loop resets the world and only the person remembers their actions, do those sins carry moral or sacramental weight after the loop ends?
Okay, so I think the answer to this is pretty straightforward, but I'm going to change the scenario a little bit to make it more illustrative, because I've seen Groundhog Day. It's been a while, but I've seen Groundhog Day, and Bill Murray's character in it, he does some stuff that could be considered sinful, but it's not blatantly, at least what I remember, it's not like he's killing people or something. It's not blatantly obvious how sinful it would be, at least in all cases, although he may sleep with his girlfriend in one of the loops, I forget. But I'm going to use a different fictional enterprise, so to speak, that uses the same concept in a more clear way for purposes of the illustration. And that is an episode of Star Trek Discovery. Now, I stopped watching Star Trek Discovery because I didn't think it was really good Star Trek. I thought it has a whole bunch of literary flaws that I won't go into, because if you get me started on them, we could go on for a little bit.
Okay.
But it's set a few years before the original series, or Those Old Scientists. And one of the characters from the original series was a kind of con man named Harry Mudd. And they have Harry Mudd as a character in Star Trek Discovery. So this is a few years before he shows up in the original series, and he is a con man, but he's also kind of violent. And there's one episode where he's obtained a device that lets him create a time loop where his interactions with the Discovery crew will reset periodically. And he uses this for his own nefarious purposes. But what he ends up doing, he's already encountered the Discovery crew once, and he's at odds with them, and he's really mad at them. And so he just starts killing them. And he kills numerous members of the Discovery crew in pursuit of his aims, and then the loop resets. And then he starts killing them again. And it keeps resetting, and they keep getting revived by the reset of the loop, but he's killing these people. Now, that sounds horrific, but it's actually kind of funny. The episode is played in significant ways for comedy, and eventually, as in any good Harry Mudd story, he gets his comeuppance in the end. Things don't work out well for him. But let's think about what Harry Mudd is doing in this. Now, what a sin is not simply an event that happens, and it's not simply an event that affects things permanently in the world, because things in the world can get repaired. But the essence of a sin is a misuse of the will, where you bend your will to doing something evil. And so in this time loop, Harry Mudd, by killing people over and over again, is bending his will to evil. And so he is deforming his will and thus his human nature by embracing these evil activities. Now, he may know that many of them are going to get revived when the loop resets, but he doesn't know that all of them are going to. But even if he did, he's killing these people over and over and over again. And so he is radically deforming his will towards the evil. So what happens when the final loop happens and the world resets for the final time? Well, fortunately, in the Discovery episode, everybody who he'd killed ends up alive, so that's good. But Harry Mudd still has this will that he's deformed towards evil. And so Harry Mudd is going to need to go to confession for how he warped his will. Even if no one else remembers it, even if all the damage he did to people gets repaired by the reset of the loop, he nevertheless used his will in seriously evil ways, and he needs to repent of that, and he needs to go to confession afterwards. So I would say that if you're stuck in a time loop and you do bad stuff, you're still going to need to go to confession and do penance for whatever it was that you did bad, even if only you remember it.
Justin, keep that in mind if you are ever caught in a time loop. Thank you very much for the question. Thanks for getting us started. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's weird questions for Jimmy Akin today. Hey, we didn't start with the weird music. We forgot that on our end. Oh, sorry about that, Jimmy.
No problem.
Our bad. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's take a minute to find out what's on Jimmy Akin's mysterious world, where I'm sure all the music was done properly this week.
Well, this week it was time for one of our periodic Patrons Questions episodes. And so we asked our patrons what they'd like me to answer, and they wanted to know, how can ghosts move physical objects? Whether demons actually hate each other? Do children who die as infants grow up in heaven? Could an alien become a Catholic priest? Did Mary feel pain in childbirth? Why does tomato juice seem to taste better on airplanes? And is it true that pirates buried treasure, among other subjects? So you can find out the answers to all those questions if you go to mysterious.fm or your favorite podcast app, or if you go to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Jimmy Akin.
Check it out. I got to find out about the tomato juice. That's a weird thing. How people
had a feeling that would be the one that interested you.
Did you really?
Yeah.
It's just weird. You get on an airplane and people drink tomato juice, and you're like, there can't be this many people that's a regular thing, but they do it on an airplane.
And there is a reason that it really does taste better on an airplane.
Oh, all right. We'll take a quick break. Right back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com. Are you looking to study Catholic theology in a formal way with the guidance of faithful scholars? Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by the Augustine Institute, offering master's degrees in theology, pastoral theology, and Catholic education with flexible study options on campus, online, or both. The Augustine Institute equips students to serve Christ and His Church in schools, parishes, dioceses, apostolates, and the home. Learn more today at augustine.edu.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
EWTN has just increased my faith so much. I am a cradle Catholic, and I thought I knew my faith very well. When Mother Angelica passed away, and it was so much in the news, I learned all about EWTN and started listening all the time. And my eyes have been opened to my faith so much.
There it is. That's our crack team. Came up with that. There's the music that goes with Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. And whenever you hear it, you know you're about to get some fun stuff going on. People love to ask Jimmy their weird questions. And here's another one from Nicholas. Nicholas says, "Hi, I'm a mega fan of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. I am 14 and I have a weird question for you. First, in The Lord of the Rings, how culpable are people for mortal sin when they wear the One Ring?" I would just like to say 14 years old using the word culpable. Good job, Nicholas. I'm asking because it is possible to ignore the temptation of the ring.
So let's do that. Then we'll do his second question.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I have to start by saying that I have never read in their entirety the Lord of the Rings books. I have seen the movies. I've seen all the movies, and not just the Peter Jackson ones. I've seen the Nelvana Ralph Bakshi productions too, from back in the 70s. One of which only ended up on TV and was never theatrically released. So I'm familiar with the basic plots. But Tolkien may have stuff in the books that provides more detail about how the ring works than what I'm aware of. So I don't know, Cy, you may know more about that than me. You may have read the books in their entirety.
Yeah.
You did?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, so you may be able to add some color to this, but assuming that it is possible to ignore the temptation that the One Ring provides, which it would seem to be, given that Tom Bombadil is totally unfazed by the One Ring. He's playing with it at the beginning of the first of the Lord of the Rings books, which I understand why they dropped that sequence from the movies, because the movies opened with a very effective portrayal of how dangerous the ring is, and it would totally undercut that to have Tom Bombadil spinning it around his finger and not caring. So I think that was actually a good cut for the movies. But the mere fact that it's possible to ignore the temptation does not mean that a person is not going to be committing mortal sin. The person may or may not commit mortal sin. The church's understanding is that in order for mortal sin to occur, three conditions must be met together. One of them is there has to be grave matter, and we'll just specify that that's the case in whatever mortal sin the ring is tempting someone to do. The second is you have to have full knowledge of the moral character of the act, and that may or may not be present depending on the extent to which the ring is impacting your perception of what's going on. So it could be that the ring is depriving you of adequate knowledge of what you're doing and what it really consists of. And then the third condition is that there must be deliberate consent, meaning this is a free choice that the person is making. But it's not deliberate consent if the person is under some kind of psychological compulsion. And the ring would seem to provide, since it tends to corrupt folks in some cases in radical ways like Gollum, it would seem that there is a strong psychological compulsion there, such that even Frodo succumbs to it by the end of the story, and it's only because of divine providence that the ring ends up being destroyed, because Frodo was not going to destroy it there at the end, and he knew what the stakes were. He knew the Shire and other places would just be ravaged by Sauron if he didn't destroy the ring. And so that would seem to indicate that the ring, at least in some circumstances, has tremendous psychological compulsion power. So even if it's possible for some unusually strong individuals like Tom Bombadil to ignore it, and even if a normal person could ignore it in some circumstances, like let's say when you're far from Mount Doom, your culpability will be diminished by the ring's noetic effects, which are its effects on your beliefs and what you perceive yourself to be doing, and it will also be, your culpability will also be mitigated by the degree of compulsion the ring has over you in that moment. So on two grounds, both by interfering with your knowledge of what you're doing and by interfering with the normal exercise of your will to make deliberative choices, you could end up not being responsible in a mortal sin way for what you're doing. So it might end up being a venial sin, or even not a sin at all, if your knowledge or culpability were fundamentally removed from you. If your knowledge or your volition, your use of the will, was fundamentally removed. On the other hand, it's not guaranteed that you might not commit a mortal sin. You might still have enough control and knowledge to be mortally culpable for what you did. And even if you're not, you may have made a free choice to wear the ring, knowing what the consequences of that would be, like Bilbo. Bilbo originally started wearing the ring not knowing what it would do, but by the time in The Hobbit, but by the time of The Lord of the Rings, he had learned the corrupting effect of the ring. And there's even a moment in the Peter Jackson movies where he's given the ring to Frodo, but he just doesn't want to let it go, and he even looks monstrous as he lunges for the ring at one point, because he wants to wear it because it's addictive. Well, okay, someone who engages when they are in control of themselves, who, let's say, gets drunk or high, knowing that that's going to lead them to do immoral things, is responsible for the path that they set themselves on. So if let's say someone goes out to a bar and starts drinking like crazy, knowing they're going to drive home in an unsafe state, they assume responsibility for driving home in an unsafe state, and that can be mortally sinful. Same thing if they know they're going to get high. Let's say they're smoking weed and they know they're going to get high, and then they're going to drive to the store to get snacks because they're going to have the munchies. Well, they're responsible for the dangerous condition they're going to be driving in. And so in the same way, one could have the ring and not be wearing it, but be tempted to wear it in a state where you still have control of yourself. And, your addiction is not so far gone that you have no control over this. And if you then, while you have control of yourself, choose to wear the ring, knowing what it's going to lead to, then you have assumed the moral responsibility for what it will lead to. And you could mortally sin by wearing the ring, by choosing to wear the ring, once you know what the consequences of that act are going to be, and you just want to do it anyway.
All right, Nicholas, there's question number 1 for you. Nicholas's second question: does the Holy Spirit guide other sects of the Catholic Church, such as Greek Orthodox or the Coptic? And then he says, keep up the great work, and it would make my day if you answer my questions on Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Oh, okay, Nicholas, there you go. Made your day.
Yeah. So Greek Orthodox and Coptic Christians, at least as the term is normally used, are not actually part of the Catholic Church, unfortunately, at present. Hopefully, we can repair things in the future. But right now, they would be Eastern non-Catholic Christians. But that doesn't mean the Holy Spirit doesn't guide them. The Holy Spirit works in the lives of all human beings, and that's true even of people who are not Catholic. It says in John's Gospel that Jesus, for example, enlightens every man in some way who comes into the world, whether they're Christian or not. And similarly, the Holy Spirit works in the hearts of all human beings. And so he's certainly going to work in the hearts of those who have a relationship consciously with the triune God and who have valid sacraments and things like that. So our Greek Orthodox friends and our Coptic Oriental Orthodox friends they have a conscious relationship with God. They have the Christian faith. They have valid sacraments in their cases. And so the Holy Spirit is working in their hearts. He will guide them. He may not give these bodies the same fullness of his guidance that he gives the Catholic Church, but he is working in them and guiding them, and that applies to all Christians and, in a broader sense, even all human beings.
Nicholas, great questions. Thank you very much for them, and glad you got through. Let's go to a question from Kristen. My name is Kristen, and here are 3 weird questions that popped into my head recently. Is the website created by soon-to-be canonized Blessed Carlo Acutis a relic? For that matter, are the writings of saints, whether in written or digital form, relics?
Okay, so I think that Kristen has actually had a really good insight here, which is, in addition to asking about the website, for which there's no real precedent, she parallels it with other corpuses or bodies of information created by saints, like their books, their writings, and so forth, whether they're physical or digital. Well, nobody has ever regarded them as relics. If you have a print edition of Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologiae, for example, no one would consider that a relic. And if you had a digital edition of the Summa Theologia, no one would consider that a relic either. And so even though there is a connection between the Summa Theologia and St. Thomas Aquinas, it isn't the kind that would be considered a relic. And I think that the same thing is going to apply to a website that a saint created. So I would have to say that once he's canonized, the website that was created about Eucharistic miracles by Blessed Carlos Acutis would not be considered a relic. In order for something to be a relic, it needs to be something that fits one of the traditional categories for relics. First-class relics are notable parts of the saint's body, and second-class relics are things that the saint personally owned. So, like, let's suppose Thomas Aquinas had a personal copy of his Summa Theologia that was, printed in his own day. Well, that copy of the Summa Theologia would be a second-class relic, but not other copies. And in the same way, you might argue that, well, okay, Blessed Carlos Acutis's laptop or desktop or whatever device he created his website on, if that device would be a second-class relic, and if it contains in its memory files a copy of the website, then that electronic copy on his device would be part of a second-class relic. But other copies, like on my computer, if I download the website, that's not a relic any more than a copy of the Summa Theologia would be if it wasn't owned, if that copy was not owned by Thomas Aquinas. And then third-class relics are those that are brought into contact with first and second class relics, but that contact is understood to be physical, not digital. And so even if my version of the website has been in electronic contact with the original version that he did, it's still not going to be a relic because it's not in physical contact with them.
Kristen said she had 3 questions, so we'll try to work our way through those and lots more questions, weird questions, as a matter of fact, for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun. And that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Deepen your connection to the Church's holy days and seasons while you draw on the wisdom of the Church Fathers. Feasts of Our Fathers, the new book from Mike Aquilina and Adam Lucas, is a treasury of history, prayers, insights, and lessons that will bring you closer to the earliest of Catholic traditions. Take your prayer life and your solidarity with the Church, past and present, to a new level. Order your copy of Feasts of Our Fathers today at shop.catholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin's our guest both hours today. We've got lots of weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live today. And Kristen gave us 3 that just popped into her head, she said. And so we're on to number 2. And this in this one, Kristen asks, studies show that everyone likely has at least one doppelganger. They've done studies of this. Could it be when we make life-altering decisions that a doppelganger is actually split from us and onto a separate timeline? Like, for example, what if a doppelganger of me actually stayed with that guy I dated and is now living the life I would have led had I not dumped him?
Well, okay, so this is actually a theory that has been proposed. Now, it's not a scientifically testable theory, which means it's not really a matter of science because science needs to be testable. Instead, I would classify this as a metaphysical speculation, metaphysics being part of philosophy about what's ultimately real. And if other timelines are real, then that would put them in the domain of metaphysics. But we have no way of scientifically verifying that they're real. And so this is just metaphysical speculation. It's not something that's scientifically provable. But it has been proposed that whenever a person makes a choice, or whenever an event happens that even without choice, whenever an event happens that could have gone another way, that the universe splits into different timelines. And so and this deals with quantum mechanical phenomena, because there are loads of different decisions that on some versions of quantum mechanics have a certain probability of happening, but you can't say which one it's going to be. Like, if we did a measurement, would the electron be on the right-hand side or the left-hand side of some point? And according to one understanding, far from the only one, but according to one understanding, whenever you have an event like that, it ends up creating two timelines, one where the electron's on the right and one where the electron's on the left. The same thing would happen with macroscopic things like human choices, like, do you dump the guy or do you stay with the guy? And so it is proposed by some individuals that you do have this branching set of timelines based on either our choices or even small subatomic events, and then they proceed from where they were. So there would be a timeline. In fact, there would be many timelines where you stayed with the guy and then various things happened. Maybe after you didn't dump him, he did dump you, and then that would lead to another branch. So there would actually, in the robust version of this theory, there would be a potentially infinite number of timelines out there based on the different ways that decisions and quantum events could happen. And this has actually led to another speculation, which is kind of interesting, called quantum immortality, where the idea is you've got all these branching timelines, and in many of them you die from one cause or another. Maybe you get hit by a car, and that timeline, you're dead in that timeline. But in another one, you don't get hit by a car. Instead, you go on to die in an airplane crash, and thus you're dead in that timeline. But then there's another where you didn't die in the airplane crash. Instead, you got hit by lightning, and then you're dead in that timeline. But there's another one where you didn't get hit by lightning. You survived to get severe diabetes and died from diabetes complications. And so there are all these different timelines where you died, but there's always one where you survive. And so according to this quantum immortality proposal, there are timelines where you're effectively immortal, where none of the things that could kill you end up killing you, and so you just remain alive. Now, I think that is an interesting speculation. I don't think it has no scientific support, and frankly, I'm skeptical of it. And I'm also skeptical of the branching timelines theory in general, because not only do we not have evidence for these other timelines, though I'd be happy if they existed, but they seem to violate, or at least if not violate, come into tension with other things we know, like the conservation of mass and energy. Because if you had one universe before, and now you have two universes in different timelines, where did all the mass and energy to fill a second universe come from? It's like, God could create that mass and energy and have it pop into existence, just like he did for the beginning of the universe. But unless God is doing a special act of creation at every moment where something happens, it would seem that you've got all kinds of matter and energy coming into existence willy-nilly, and vast quantities of matter and energy, a whole universe worth. And that's just kind of a lot. Now, it's not that it can't happen. It could be that the law of conservation of mass and energy doesn't work the way we think it does, that it applies to things within the universe, but it doesn't apply to the universe as a whole. So the universe can just suddenly duplicate itself. But as our old friend William of Ockham said, don't multiply entities beyond necessity. And since we don't have evidence for these other universes, we shouldn't employ other universes as explanations for anything we see, and should just consider this at most interest in speculation, but that we have no serious evidence for.
All right, Kristen, your questions are good. So on we go with your third question. Everyone seems to believe aliens, if they exist, must be strange and non-human like. But isn't it possible that life on another Earth-like planet could mirror ours? And if so, what if the mysterious man from Taured was actually an alien human from another Earth-like planet?
Okay, so I'll explain who the man from Taured was. This is an internet story that I covered in episode 343 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. So you can go to mysterious.fm/343, or you could go to my YouTube page and type in Taured, Taured. The story is that a gentleman got off a flight in Japan, and when he showed his passport to the customs officials there was a problem because he wasn't from any known country, and he insisted he was from a place called Taured, which was on the border of France and Spain. And he insisted that that's where I'm from, but they said, in our maps, there has never been a place called Taured there. It looked like it was, if I recall correctly, Andorra. And so he then, according to the story, they put him up in a hotel room because if they can't get a valid, passport on this guy, they're not just going to cut him loose in Japan. Their job is to control who's coming in and out of Japan. And so they put him up in a hotel, and then he vanished, as did all of his property. So that's the story. Now I'll do the question now. Could there be other worlds where life is very human-like? Well, hypothetically, yeah. In fact, in Star Trek, Those Old Scientists, they visited multiple such worlds. Like in the first season episode, Miri's planet is a carbon copy of Earth with North America and South America and Europe and Africa and Asia and everything. As well as aliens that are indistinguishable from humans. So there's no logical contradiction there, that it's logically possible. If God wanted, he could create an Earth that's identical to ours in every solar system in the universe, if he chose. The question is, what evidence do we have for that? And the evidence that something exactly like humans would evolve elsewhere seems pretty low, because you look at the history of life on Earth, well, there are some things that are kind of similar to us, like the other great apes and things like that. But humans are unique. And so probably alien intelligent life that developed elsewhere, it might have some commonalities with us. Like it's probably going to have eyes. It's probably going to have locomotion, some ability to get from one place to another. It's probably going to have the equivalent of fingers, so it can manipulate objects in its environment. But it may not be fingers. It may be octopus tentacles with suckers or something. So there would probably be similarities to us, at least in a basic way. It also is likely to have something like a tongue or some kind of vocal tract that allows for complex communication. It'll probably have a larger brain size than most of the animals on its planet, but it's probably not going to be a carbon copy to us. But let's set that aside. Supposing that, even though it's very unlikely you're going to get something exactly like a human, suppose that there were. Could the man from Taured be such an individual? Well, he'd have to be from a planet like Miri's that's got Europe and Africa and North and South America and so forth, since he could place Taured on a map and say it's right here on the border of France and Spain. So it'd have to be a very, very similar planet. Most people have not proposed he was from another planet in our universe, because you probably wouldn't get another planet, certainly not anywhere close to us, that was like that. Instead, the proposal has been maybe he slipped in from a parallel universe where Earth was just a little different. It was Earth. It was just a little bit different, where there was this country called Taured. And so that's an interesting story, and it makes for fun reading. But as I cover in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, episode 343, that's not what happened. This mystery has been solved. The man from Taured was not from another planet in our universe. He was not from another reality. And this was not just an internet myth. There was a guy who showed up in Japan that is at the basis of this. But if you want the details of exactly who he was and even what his real name was, check out episode 343 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
Kristen, you did us a great service with those 3 weird questions. Thank you very much. That brings us to the break. Right back with more of these very same weird questions with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Beyond Damascus with Dan Dematteis and Aaron Richards is our show for young adults.
Everybody's talking about encounter. Everybody's talking about that mountaintop experience. What we fail to often talk about is what happens after, what happens beyond that Damascus moment.
Jesus Christ is calling all of us to be missionary disciples, disciples of Jesus who are on mission to bring the kingdom of God here and now on this earth.
Beyond Damascus with Dan Dematteis and Aaron Richards, tomorrow at 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
A little bit of weird music there for you as we come back to Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Jimmy's the proprietor, as we said, of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where there's today dropped a new episode with patron questions, including is there any truth to the idea that tomato juice tastes better on an airplane? Yeah, it's not the only one. There's a lot of things on there, but that's the one that I remember. Check it out at mysterious.fm or check out Jimmy's YouTube page. It also has the Jimmy Akin podcast over there on the YouTube page. Those come out on Mondays, however. So what dropped Monday on the Jimmy Akin podcast?
This last Monday, I had a look at the verse that led to my conversion to the Catholic Church. I had always said that in Matthew 16, when Jesus says, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church," that Jesus was not talking about Peter as the rock, that he was contrasting Peter with the rock. And I then started to learn some more, and I began to realize that my arguments for that position were not as strong as they could be. And then one day, I was reading a quotation of this passage, and I suddenly realized there are structural features in the text that require that Peter be the rock. And that then led me to re-examine all the different aspects of Catholic theology with an open mind, because if Jesus builds the church on Peter, then once Jesus goes back to heaven, Peter's in charge, and whoever's in charge of the church in Jesus's absence is the Pope, can be described as the Pope. And so I had to conclude, well, Catholics are right. You can call Peter the first Pope. Now, that didn't mean that there were any later popes, but it did mean they were right about Peter being the first. And so I had to re-examine all the areas of systematic theology with an open mind. And so what I did in this last Monday's episode of the Jimmy Akin podcast was look at this passage and show here's why Peter has to be the rock based on what we read in the passage. Now, I knew that won't sit well with some YouTube viewers, and they're going to propose alternatives and say, oh, the rock is Jesus and things like that. And they'll even have verses they might try appealing to. So for this coming Monday's episode of the Jimmy Akin podcast, I'm going to look at 5 passages where the New Testament speaks about the foundation of the church. And in each of these 5 passages, it uses a different metaphor. So, yeah, in one of them, it's Jesus. In another, it's Peter. In another, it's Jesus and the apostles. In another, it's just the apostles. And so there are actually 5 different metaphors used in the New Testament for the foundation of the church. And what that tells us is you can't take material from one passage and cram it into the others. You have to read each passage on its own and figure out what it means without trying to import material from elsewhere. And when you do that, one of the passages does indeed, as I indicated in last Monday's episode, make Peter the rock. So in the coming Monday's episode, I'm going to talk about these other 4 passages as well and reveal to you what the New Testament has to say about the church's 5 foundations, because it uses 5 different metaphors for the church's foundation.
How exciting. You can check it out on Jimmy's YouTube page. Please do check it out there. You can also get it wherever you get your podcasts. All right, now this next question comes from Susan. Could Melchizedek have been a Zoroastrian?
Okay, so this presents us with the opportunity to do a little biblical chronology. Now, one of the things that it's always been there in chronologies, it's something known as a synchronism. Sun means, in Greek, it means together, and chronos means time. And so a synchronism is where 2 things occur at the same time. And chronologers of all different fields have always used synchronisms to try to figure out dates for things, especially in situations in the ancient world where we don't have records giving us specific dates. And these days, we've gotten really good at figuring stuff out with synchronisms. For example, there have been reconstructions of the history of Egypt using hundreds and hundreds of synchronisms, like this pharaoh was alive at the same time as this foreign king, and we know this foreign king reigned for so long, and his reign also overlapped with this second pharaoh. And so you find just hundreds of these synchronisms, and a computer can put them together in a way that no human could, but can find a way to harmonize them all, and out pops a history of Egypt based on these different synchronisms. And it broadly confirmed some of the previous chronologies. It also falsified some of the previous chronologies. Well, in the case of Melchizedek, we need to figure out, if we're asking, could he have been a Zoroastrian? We need to know when Melchizedek lived and when Zoroaster lived. Zoroaster being the founding prophet of Zoroastrianism, although, of course, as with any religion, there may have been predecessors, but the modern form known as Zoroastrianism, that was founded by Zoroaster. Okay, so do we know anybody, Psychelet, who lived at the same time as Melchizedek and therefore who has a synchronism with Melchizedek?
Well, I'm thinking Abraham.
Abraham, there you go.
Okay. Wow, man, if I got that one wrong.
Yeah. Synchronism. I mean, you could have said Lot or somebody, but Abraham. Okay. So Abraham and Melchizedek live at the same time according to the book of Genesis. And if you want to look this up, it's in Genesis 14. Well, do we have any idea when Abraham lived? Well, we do. It's probably, and there are debates about this, but probably around 1800 BC. So we'll just go with that. That's a common estimate of when Abraham lived. So that would mean Melchizedek lived around 1800 BC. Okay, how about Zoroaster? Well, one thing about could he have been a Zoroastrian? Well, he would have needed to get Zoroastrian beliefs from all the way over in Persia, where Zoroaster lived. And it would have taken time for those beliefs to come to Melchizedek. So Zoroaster would have to live no later than the 1800s BC. and probably even a bit earlier for the religious ideas of Zoroaster to get all the way over into Jebus, where Melchizedek lived. He was the king of Jebus, or modern Jerusalem. Okay, so Zoroaster would need to live 1800s or earlier. Also, we're not told anything about Melchizedek that would suggest Zoroastrianism in particular. What we're told in Genesis 14 is that he was a priest of God Most High, or to use the Hebrew version of that title, he was a priest of El Elyon. So that's not really linking him to Zoroastrianism. Now, one could understand the God of the Jews and the God worshipped by Zoroaster, who was known as Ahura Mazda, or the wise Lord, who created everything and who's in a conflict. There are various similarities between Judaism and Zoroastrianism, to where Jews and Zoroastrians might have recognized each other as fellow worshipers of God. But we're not given anything in the text of Genesis that would suggest that. It looks like he is related to the faith of Israel and that he worships God Most High, but nothing there says Zoroaster in particular. So let's look at the other part of the equation and figure out, if we can, when Zoroaster lived. The problem is nobody's really sure. There is a considerable range of dates that have been proposed for Zoroaster, and the earliest of those is about 1800 BC. The later one is 1000 BC. So it looks like we've got Abraham and Melchizedek living at the beginning of the second millennium BC, whereas Zoroaster seems to live somewhere later in the second millennium BC. Hypothetically, he could have lived at the same time as Melchizedek and Abraham, but given the distance in space between the Promised Land and Persia, which is modern Iran, it would be very hard to explain how Zoroaster's ideas got to Melchizedek so fast. And given that that we have no indication in the text that Melchizedek was an adherent of Zoroastrianism, I would say that it doesn't look promising for this speculation. If you asked me to bet, I would have to bet Melchizedek was not a Zoroastrian. But the question was, could he have been? And it's just possible, but not very probable at all.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much for the question. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. I should tell you this. I haven't read the ad yet, and summer is almost here, and there's an opportunity to get a bunch of great resources over at shop.catholic.com. We've got 50 of our best books on sale for just $5, some at $10. Shop.catholic.com. Avoid the summertime blues, $5 and $10 book sale. 50 of our very best titles. I'm sure a good number of those are by our guest today, Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And because Kerry has to put this question in every ad he writes, what are you waiting for? Visit shop.catholic.com today and check. Did you know that this is a Kerry thing? This is like a, I don't know. It's a, it's a, what do you
part of his idiolect.
Yeah. That's exactly it. I don't know what you just called him, but
no. I'll say the word again because when you're not talking, so that the audience can hear, one's personal mode of expression is known as one's idiolect. So it's, if Kerry uses this phrase regularly, it's part of his idiolect, the same way that quick as boiled asparagus was part of the Emperor Augustus's idiolect.
Did he say that a lot? Quick as boiled asparagus?
Yep.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I don't know which is better. What are you waiting for, or quick as boiled asparagus? I know which one I think is better, but I don't want to. I'm glad that was.
We're going into the break now, but we'll be back quick as boiled asparagus
with lots more weird questions for Jimmy Akin. Check out that sale. 50 books, $5 or $10 at shop.catholic.com. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Johnny Versillo running the show again today. 17 years old, in charge of the board. I was waiting for him to point at me to say it was all right to talk, but he's like, "No, you're a professional. You figure it out on your own." Thank you, Johnny, for the what do we call it? Weird? I guess we'll call it weird music. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. Jimmy Akin here with us, and Jimmy collects up these weird questions because people have figured out that they can send these questions to Jimmy and they will get a serious, a considered answer from Jimmy Akin, one that takes them seriously and their question seriously. So we've got a whole bunch more. At the last, just before we went to the break, Jimmy said that, Jimmy, that Augustus used to say quicker than boiled asparagus.
Quick as boiled asparagus. It was one of his personal pet phrases, and thus part of his idiolect. And
how do we know that? Is it just by people reporting on, like, writing letters about him or something like that?
Yeah, if you read, I believe this particular one, along with a few other of his pet phrases, was mentioned in Suetonius's Lives of the 12 Emperors.
Oh, okay.
But it's in the Roman history sources.
So it's weird to think of asparagus 2,000 years ago. Like, I was saying to you at the break, you get this, like, well, how much has it changed in 2,000 years? Like, would I recognize it as asparagus? I mean, I suppose
you'd recognize it as asparagus. It may have been somewhat different, just like they had grapes in the ancient world, but their grapes would not have been seedless the way ours are, and they wouldn't have been as big and plump, because over time we've used horticulture to improve the qualities of plants that we want them to have. So typically our fruits are much bigger and have more sugar in them than the ancient versions of the fruits did. So modern cultivars are almost always different than the ancient equivalent that it came from, but it should have been recognizable as asparagus.
So he said quick as boiled asparagus. So here's my question for you: does asparagus boil particularly quickly, and why would it if it does?
Yeah, so assuming you pick it at the right time, it will boil quickly compared to comparable foods. Now, if you let asparagus go too long, it's going to get really thick and woody. So you want to pick the asparagus when it is not yet thick and woody. You want to pick it when it's more flexible and younger and not as thick. But it would, compared to a comparable food mass of another kind, it would boil quickly. And the reason is because it's long and skinny. So to help us understand this, if you think about, pasta, like spaghetti, especially angel hair spaghetti, it's long and thin, but it's made out of dough. It's basically almost all wheat with maybe a few little extra things in there. But if you imagine taking a ball of dough, let's say it weighs a pound, and you shape it into a sphere and set that ball of dough aside, and then you take another ball of dough that also weighs a pound, but instead of shaping it into a sphere, you put it through a pasta maker that converts it into these long, thin hair-like strands, like angel hair pasta. And you take both the spherical ball of dough and the angel hair pasta and dump them into different pots of boiling water. The angel hair is going to boil much faster. Than it's going to cook thoroughly. Right. And the reason for that, scientifically speaking, is because the angel hair pasta, by turning it into pasta instead of a sphere, it has much greater surface area for the same mass. They both weigh a pound, but the pasta has much greater surface area than the sphere does. And consequently, if you think about, well, in order for it to cook thoroughly, the heat from the water has to get to the center of whatever shape is being boiled. Right. And it's going to take a lot longer for the heat from the boiling water to get to the center of a 1 pound sphere than it is to get to the center of a narrow little strand of pasta. And so because asparagus is long and thin like pasta, it's going to boil quicker than boiling something else of equivalent mass that doesn't have that long, thin shape.
So there's Augustus. He's like, that stuff boils quickly because it's long and thin. And look at that chariot guy. He's quick as boiled asparagus.
Yeah.
That's what he would say.
And
That kind
and
of
the
thing.
chariot guy will pay you on Greek kalends.
Okay, now you got to help me with what does that mean? I don't know. Like I think 75% of those words I don't even know what they are. What the
Okay.
Greek? Yeah, what?
Greek kalends. Yeah. So they didn't number. They had in Roman timekeeping, they had months, but they didn't number the days of the month the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they had different periods within the month. For example, one of them, what Julius Caesar was told.
The
right
Ides of
before
March.
his assassination, beware the Ides of March. Well, the Ides were sometimes what we would call the 13th of the month, and sometimes what we would call the 15th of the month. The beginning of the month, though, was the calends. And so the beginning of another of Augustus's pet phrase was that someone would pay you on Greek kalends, because kalends was part of the Roman timekeeping system.
Oh,
It was
so you're not getting paid.
It was not part of the Greek timekeeping system. They didn't use it, and so there was no such thing as Greek kalends, and consequently, Augustus meant you're never going to get paid by that guy.
That I've always suspected that is also the meaning of when someone says, "I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today." That I don't think you're going to get paid on Tuesday.
Oh, that's such a wimpy answer.
All right, off we go to the questions again. Weird questions with Jimmy Akin. Joe wants to know, why is there no gospel according to Jesus, or why is there nothing written attributed to Jesus?
Well, in regard to the first question, why is there no gospel attributed to Jesus? Because he didn't write one. He preached orally, and he commissioned his 12 apostles to learn his message and then preach it themselves. So there was no mandate for them. He didn't mandate them to write scripture. Some of them later chose to, but he didn't mandate that, and he didn't do it himself. We do have evidence indicating that he knew how to write, because in the pericope adulterae, where the woman caught in adultery is brought before him, Jesus is writing on the ground with his finger. He also knew how to read, which we know from Luke's gospel, where when he visits Nazareth, he's given a copy of the scroll of Isaiah to read, and he reads from it. So he did know how to read and write, but he just didn't choose to write a gospel. That's not what he was about. He let other people learn about him and his story, and they could preach it, and then later they could write it, but this was not something he was doing himself. He had other things that he was focused on during his brief 3-year ministry. Also, the highlight of his ministry is his crucifixion. So how is he going to write about that if he's writing a gospel himself? I mean, when you got your arms nailed up, it's kind of hard to write.
Yeah.
So, that would be left to someone else naturally. On the other hand, with regard to the second question, why is there nothing written attributed to Jesus? That's not true. There are written things that are attributed to Jesus. Now, many people will, for example, claim to have private revelations where they take dictation from Jesus that is meant to be written down and given to others. And most of those are probably not authentic. But there is even an early Christian claim that goes way, way back that does attribute a written document to Jesus. This is the story of King Abgar of Edessa. And so Edessa is a neighboring kingdom to Judea. And according to this story, one of the first century kings of Edessa, named Abgar, had a disease, and he wrote Jesus. And he'd heard about Jesus as a miracle worker, and he's a king. He's got this disease. So he writes to this famous healer and says, I've got this disease. Could you come and heal me? And by the way, I hear you're having some trouble with the Jewish authorities, and you're welcome to live here. I'll give you a safe place. Well, getting a safe place and not going to the cross and not redeeming mankind was not part of Jesus's plan. So he said no. But according to this story, he wrote a letter in which he, like thanked King Abgar for his invitation. And he said, I'm not able to go right now, but I'll eventually send you one of my disciples to cure your disease. And he later did after the crucifixion. And we have a copy of the claimed letter from Abgar and a copy of the claimed letter from Jesus. And this is really early. This incident is recorded in, I think it's book 2 of Eusebius's Ecclesiastical History, which was written about the year 320. So sometime within the first 300 years of church history, this story passed into popular culture in the Christian world. And Eusebius says that this is actually found in the archives at Edessa. If so, it could have been salted in the archives at an earlier date, but it is something early that is attributed to Jesus as a written document.
All right. So, because that's the way he asked it. Why is there nothing attributed to Jesus? And there we have it from even the early days of the church. Thank you very much, Joe. I got to go to the break. Yeah, we'll take a quick break. Right back with more weird questions. Let's get to go with Jimmy Akin right after this.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
Hi, this is Father Mike Schmitz. Please join me for Ascension's Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year here on EWTN Radio. We're going through the entire Bible and the Catechism in 365 days. If you've ever wanted to understand what it means to be Catholic and allow those truths to shape your life, this is for you.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. A whole bunch of weird questions. But they come all the time for Jimmy, so Jimmy collects them for us. And we do these shows from time to time. This question comes from Joe. I beg your pardon. I just did the question from Joe about the writing of Jesus. Mark asked this. Could there be aliens, intelligent species from a distant planet, enjoying eternal life in heaven? If there are intelligent aliens living on other planets, do they have guardian angels?
Well, so the first question begins with the word could, and could means, is it possible? So is it possible that there are aliens enjoying eternal life in heaven? Sure, it's possible. I don't know that there are aliens, but, scientifically, it would seem that there are likely to be some. And if there are some, now the faith perspective doesn't have anything to say about, do aliens exist? God hadn't told us. But if they exist, then they're other children of God. They may be good children, they may be bad children, but they're other children of God. Some of them may not go to heaven, though, even if they're suppose they're an unfallen race. Well, according to Scripture, if our race had not fallen, we would have access to the tree of life, which symbolizes the means of immortality. And so we wouldn't die, and thus we wouldn't go to heaven. We'd live in a paradise on earth. Well, if God gave the same deal to another race that he gave to ours, and if they didn't screw it up the way we did, then they wouldn't die. They would just continue to live in a paradise on their own planet. So they might not go to heaven for that reason. On the other hand, suppose their entire race did fall and fell hard the way demons did and didn't repent, well, then they wouldn't go to heaven for that reason. Or suppose God's will for them is different than us in that their fate is not resurrection. Suppose that God chose to maintain them as immortal spirits. They might not only go to heaven, but remain in heaven forever. Or God could have other plans for another race. We can't say anything about them since we don't know anything about them, but these are some of the possibilities of what God could choose to do. So is it possible that there could be aliens enjoying heaven? Yeah, it's possible, but there are other options too. The second question is, if there are intelligent aliens living on other planets, do they have guardian angels? Well, this isn't an is it possible question. I think it's possible for aliens to have guardian angels, especially if they have something they need guarding from. But if they don't have anything they need guardian angels for, they might not have guardian angels. And so consequently, I would have to say, I don't know. It's possible that they have guardian angels. It's possible they don't have guardian angels, especially if they don't need guardian angels. But since this is an up or down, yes or no question, I have to say, I don't know.
Mark, thank you very much for the question. This one comes from Denise, who asks, do dogs remember their previous experiences? I have a foster dog that was rescued from a hoarding situation. Now he is safe and well cared for, but I worry that he remembers being hungry and lost.
Well, okay, so let's answer the basic question. Do dogs remember their previous experiences? Yes, to a significant degree. Now, humans don't remember all of their experiences. So, and human memory works in such a way that past hurts fade with time. I know there were times in my childhood that I was bullied and in pain, and I don't even remember those times. So time heals all wounds, as they say. And given that dogs are kind of like children in that they are very focused on the now and the present, and they're excited about that, and they experience time quicker than we do. You notice as a child, summer seemed, really long, and now as adults, summer just flies by. Well, we perceive time differently at different points in our lives, and my suspicion is dogs are more like children. They're very focused on what's happening in the now, and they don't have a sense of lengthy periods of time the way we do, which means they're likely to have a lot of things just kind of go by them that they don't remember. So the dog may not remember being hungry and lost in particular, but dogs do remember experiences. I have multiple lines of evidence for that. I mean, there is the fact that, well, you can train dogs, and training requires memory of previous experiences, the training experiences. That doesn't mean, though, that they remember the training as distinct events. There's a phenomenon that humans have where there's a difference between autobiographical memory, where we remember specific events, and things we've been trained to do. I've learned multiple forms of dance, and I know how to do the move because it's in what's sometimes called muscle memory, but I don't remember specifically being taught the move. Normally, I don't have an autobiographical memory of the training moment. And the same thing could be true with dogs and tricks. They may know how to do the trick, like shake or whatever, but they may have no memory of how they learned to do shake. But they definitely do have some autobiographical memory where, for example, my sister used to have a dog that was 7/8 Siberian Husky, 1/8 Wolf. Her name was Lock Anna Rudaba, because my sister likes giving dogs and children creative names. Loch Anarudiba was known as Locke for short. And one of the things my sister told me is that that she had a particular friend who would come over, and she and her friend would go hiking together. And every time her friend would come over, she and her friend would go hiking together, and they'd take Locke with them. And so Locke came to expect, I see this friend, that means we're about to go hiking. And one day the friend came over for a different purpose. And so they were not going hiking, and Locke was so confused. But her reaction to expecting hiking whenever this friend came over would suggest that she had memories of hiking with this friend previously. My sister's current dog, Luna Meteora, but Luna also displays signs of autobiographical memory. For example, I sometimes care for Luna, and I will play games with Luna. Like I have these little squeaky toys. It's like a little rubber circle. It looks kind of like a biscuit. I think of it as a squeaky toy, but my sister calls it a biscuit. And one of Luna's favorite games is Catch the Biscuit. And so all I have to do is, when I'm taking care of Luna, is get one of the biscuits out of the drawer and squeak it, and she knows we're going outside to play Catch the Biscuit. And that would suggest she remembers previous occasions of Catch the Biscuit. Also, I noticed once, sometimes I'll sit on my couch and let Luna snuggle with me, and I'll pet her and stuff like that. Well, one day my sister came over to help me with a home improvement project. And so my sister and I are working on the home improvement project, but Luna wants to relate. And so she hops up on the couch, and she's like, "Here I am, you can come over and let me snuggle you." And that would suggest she remembers autobiographically previous occasions of sitting on the couch with me. So dogs do display evidence of autobiographical memory, but that doesn't mean that, Denise, that your dog remembers being hungry and lost and so forth. Dogs' memories are not as good as human memory in all likelihood. And so if a human like me can forget the details of being, bullied and stuff as a kid, your dog can forget it too. So I wouldn't feel unduly sad about that. The important thing is your dog does know that they're safe and well, and that they're being cared for, and that you love them, and that's what's important. They're not dwelling on the past. That's one thing dogs pretty much don't do.
Thank you, Denise, for the question. Let's go to Stephen now. We've got time for Stephen's question. Stephen wants to know,
this is easy.
Could there be an alternate universe or dimension where 2 + 2 = 5? Is that a mathematical truth that only applies to our universe?
So the answer, as the question is phrased and interpreting the words according to their normal meaning, the answer is no. There is no universe where 2 + 2 = 5. That's true by definition. And God can create anything as long as it doesn't involve a logical contradiction. But the idea that 2 + 2 = 5 does involve a logical contradiction. And so God could not create a universe where the laws of mathematics, which are true by definition, could be different. Just like God couldn't create a universe where a bachelor is something other than an unmarried male, because that's what a bachelor is by definition. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't play with the situation and try to come up with universes that sound like that. Like maybe in another universe, they just use the word bachelor different. Maybe they use it to refer to a married man. Okay, but you've just changed the definition of the word. And, yes, God could make a universe where the word bachelor meant an unmarried man, meant a married man, but you're bending the language there. You're not referring to what we refer to as bachelor. You're referring to something else. It's just a different use of the word. And in the same way, you could come up with a mathematical system where 2 + 2 = 5, but it would involve revising the definitions of terms. Like, what does addition mean? Maybe it means summing up the two components that are named in the equation and an extra element. So 2 + 2 = 5, 2 + 3 = 6, 2 + 4 = 7, and so forth. But then you've redefined what addition is. You could also imagine a situation where God, let's say you've got 2 apples and you put them together with 2 more apples, and boom, God creates a 5th apple. Yeah, but that's not 2 + 2, that's 2 + 2 plus God creating something new. So if you leave all the terms with their normal meaning, 2 + 2 = 4 and not 5 is a universal truth across all universes.
Thanks, Stephen. Right back with more Jimmy Akin. Weird Questions on Catholic Answers Live. Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun. And that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, of morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. On this Friday afternoon in Southern California, Jimmy Akin is our guest, and it's weird questions for Jimmy Akin. We've got a whole bunch of them. This one comes from Audrey, and Audrey asks this. I suspect I know the answer, but in some fantasy genre systems of magic, in particular, I'm thinking of the works of Tamora Pierce, which are aimed at young girls, magic is described as a natural-born talent which involves being able to engage your personal energy to achieve desired results like healing, transfiguration, etc. It is specifically mentioned that only some humans can do this, and the ability is from birth. So no involvement of demons or other supernatural figures. Of course, this talent can be used for evil like anything else. If, however, magic like this was a God-given talent, would it be licit to use this talent for things like healing on recognition that this is God working through you?
Okay. So the question involves several dimensions. One of them is, I guess the first thing I'll mention is this is actually something that's a version of this is actually believed in some parts of the world. In Africa, Psychella, you may occasionally hear stories coming out through the press about witches and witches being persecuted in Africa and believing, it's believed that they cause problems for the community and stuff like that. And that suggests something to our ears that is not actually what's happening, because they're conceptualizing of witches differently than we do. We think of a witch as a person who has learned an ability to do magic and then uses it, typically for destructive purposes.
Okay.
But they have a distinction. At least this is how it works in the translation in anthropological literature. They have a distinction between what are called witches and what are called sorcerers. A sorcerer is what we think of as a witch. It's someone who has learned magic as a craft. What they think of as a witch is kind of what Audrey is describing, as it's a person who just has this native ability, and they didn't have to learn it. They didn't have to go to Hogwarts or whatever. They just naturally have this ability, and they are believed to typically cause destructive phenomena without even necessarily meaning it. They're not trying to do this. They're like what we would call a jinx. And, if you believe that there are people who are jinxes that are causing destructive effects in your community, you may not want them in your community, and you may take various steps to try to get them out of your community. And thus we hear these periodic stories in the press occasionally about witches being persecuted in Africa. Well, that's the kind of witch they're talking about. It's what we would think of as a jinx.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of similar to what Audrey's talking about here. Now, let's look at this through another lens, which is the terminology that developed in this area during the Middle Ages. There's a distinction in the Western tradition between two different types of magic. And you may think I'm going to say white and black, and no, that is not it. There's a distinction between what is known as ceremonial magic and what is known as natural magic. In the Western tradition, ceremonial magic is where you contact a spirit and get the spirit to do things for you. Like you may contact an angel, you may contact a demon, you may contact a departed human spirit, you could contact God, but you're invoking a spirit to get the spirit to do something for you that you can't do yourself. So that's what ceremonial magic is. Natural magic is different. You don't contact a spirit in natural magic. What you do is you rely on hidden principles of nature, things that are built into nature, either part of human nature or part of the natural world around us, and you rely on them. So that's why it's called natural magic, because it comes out of nature, either human nature or the natural world. But you don't have to invoke a spirit. And so you have this distinction that in the Western tradition between ceremonial magic and natural magic. Interestingly, when Isaac Newton proposed gravity, he got accused of introducing a concept from natural magic into what was then known as natural philosophy. Oh. Today, we call natural philosophy science. So we would classify what Isaac Newton was doing as science, but back then they called it natural philosophy. But he was accused of this gravity thing. That's magic, because it disagreed with the Aristotelian physics of the day. According to Aristotle, one object could not have an influence on another object unless there was some medium connecting them that would allow the influence from one object to be transmitted to the other. So, you can't hear me unless there's air between us to carry the sound of my voice. It's not like I can just talk with no air, with a vacuum between us, and have you hear me. The air is needed as a medium to carry the effect of my voice to your ears, or air plus microphones and headphones and so forth, since we're on the radio. Okay, so for Aristotle, that was a universal principle. In his understanding of physics, there is no such thing as action at a distance. There has to be a connected medium to allow the influence to transmit from one thing to the other. And then along comes Newton, and Newton says, okay, there's this thing, I don't know what it is, but I'm calling it gravity, from the Latin word gravitas, which means heaviness. And it turns out objects can have an influence on each other at a distance without any connected medium to transmit that influence. It can happen across a vacuum of space. The sun's gravity can have an effect on Earth and its motions. And people said, well, if you're talking about your newfangled gravity has action at a distance, then that's a concept from natural magic. It would be an undiscovered principle of nature, and because it conflicts with Aristotelian physics, and no one had discovered anything that had an action at a distance without a medium. And so Newton said, yeah, you're kind of right about that. This is a concept from natural magic. I'm relying on a previously unknown principle or hidden principle in nature. And in terms of a Christian perspective, natural magic, ceremonial magic, is problematic. But what was called natural magic, well, if you've genuinely got a principle that God built into nature, there's no reason you can't use it. You could use gravity to put satellites in orbit. You could use electromagnetism to run your iPhone. You could use any number of things that were then considered hidden or occult, like magnets, because no one had any idea how the influence of a magnet worked. Thomas Aquinas cites magnets as an example of the occult, meaning the hidden. He says there's this hidden virtue in magnets that lets them affect some metals. And he didn't mean it was bad. He just meant man does not know how magnets affect other metals. And so it was hidden, or occultus in Latin. So you could conceivably use natural magic. Now, today, in the scientific community, we don't really use the word magic. Instead, we use other terminology, like in the science of parapsychology, psychic functioning, which does, according to the understanding that has developed, normally involve latent or hidden abilities that are hidden in the sense that they haven't been previously discovered in human nature, to do things like heal people, or maybe in some cases harm people. But Audrey mentions healing as an example. Well, if God really built such abilities into human nature, even if they haven't been previously discovered by science, it would be legitimate to use them. If God gave us the ability to, heal someone and they need healing, it would be legitimate to use the ability that God gave us. Now, that'll get complicated if people start calling it magic, because modern people, especially in the Christian community, don't know the history of the term magic, and they assume all magic would be regarded as bad, when really ceremonial magic was regarded as bad. But using previously undiscovered natural principles, of the universe, that wasn't considered bad. So I would say that, in answer to Audrey, that it does not sound to me like, based on the way she poses the question, that anything morally problematic would be going on here. If someone has a God-given talent to, say, heal somebody or something like that, well, you can use your God-given talents.
All right, Audrey, what a fascinating question. Thank you very much for that. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Human beings are God's greatest masterpiece. Every person is made in the image and likeness of God. But every saint, that is, every person who accepts God's invitation, his upward call to make them holy. And so every story presents us with a unique masterpiece that God is writing.
The Journey Home, Monday night, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and television.
Catholic Answers Live. How's the call screening going, Edgar? Easy day, huh? Call screening when we don't have any calls. We're just taking, we've already taken the questions from the internet for Jimmy. Weird questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. And I am on Juan now, right? Up next is Juan. Juan wanted to know this. Did Moses eat mushrooms and hallucinate the burning bush?
Well, that's not what Exodus indicates. Exodus indicates that God appeared in the bush and made it burn and not be consumed, and Moses saw this. That's what Exodus says. If you propose that he did something like eat magic mushrooms and then hallucinate the burning bush, you're going beyond what the text says. And this is part of a broader tendency that exists in some circles to do what sometimes is called demythologization. It's also sometimes called euhemerism, after the Greek philosopher Euhemerus. But what it involves is taking something that is of a supernatural nature and proposing a non-supernatural explanation for it. Like, oh, Moses didn't really see a bush that was burning, that would be a miracle, but yet that was not consumed, so that would be a miracle. He just took magic mushrooms and hallucinated. That's one example of an attempt to demythologize the story of the burning bush. Another that I've heard of is, oh, well, there was actually a natural gas leak behind the burning bush, and that caught on fire, and Moses saw the natural gas leak by looking through the bush, and so that's why he saw fire behind the bush and why the bush wasn't consumed, because the fire wasn't actually touching the bush. It was just behind it, and it looked like the bush was burning but not being consumed. So that would be another example of an attempt to demythologize this. What Euhemerus did was he took the stories of Greek mythology and said, okay, they're based on real people who then got exaggerated into being gods at some point. So like there was a guy who used to be, there was a human who was Apollo, and maybe he had a chariot that reflected the light of the sun because it had metal on it. And then that became, oh, Apollo is the sun god and he rides his chariot across the sky every day. And it was another attempt to take the mythology out of a supernatural story. Well, okay, you can propose any explanation you want for what we read. You can propose magic mushrooms. You could propose Moses had, schizoaffective disorder. You can propose Moses saw a natural gas leak. You can propose Moses had a stroke that affected the visual center in his brain temporarily, a transient ischemic event. You could propose aliens came down and used advanced tech to simulate the burning bush. You could propose they took Moses into a holodeck and generated it. You can propose anything you want. You can explain any event you want in numerous alternate ways if you are untethered from evidence and just allowed to speculate. So the question, though, is how good is your proposal? Merely coming up with an idea does not mean we have evidence that the idea is true. And so one needs to remain tethered to the evidence. And we don't have any evidence that Moses ate magic mushrooms. So even though you can propose that as an explanation, we don't have any evidence that that's what happened in this case. The text of Genesis indicates this was a miracle. And I'm a big believer, and I would say we have reason to rely in, on the Bible. And I also believe in the philosophical principle known as phenomenal conservatism, which says that you take experiences the way they appear until you get evidence that they should be taken in another way. So if you have evidence that we ought to take the Bible seriously, and the Bible says Moses saw a burning bush, then I would take that seriously until someone can produce evidence that we should take this in a different sense.
Juan, thank you for the question. And on we go to Felix. Felix says, I have two you can consider. All right, Felix, thank you. Here's the first of Felix's question. Would it be a formal apostasy, heresy, or schism to profess belief in a multiverse and or a simulation hypothesis where an alternate reality exists in which the substance of our divine revelation either never happened or happened in an opposite way, or where our dogmatic facts and moral laws do not apply or apply in the reverse?
No, it would not.
Well, that's okay. So that was a long, convoluted question. So what would not what?
Yeah, it would not be apostasy, heresy, or schism to propose an alternate reality in somewhere in the multiverse. The Catholic Church doesn't have any teaching about a multiverse, unless you want to consider, heaven and hell alternate dimensions, so that we'd have a multiverse with our dimension. But if you propose more broadly, the Catholic Church didn't have any teaching on that, and so it would be a matter of speculation. But speculating that there would be a universe where where none of our divine revelation happened, well, that wouldn't contradict God's omnipotence. God, as we've said, he can actualize any state of affairs that does not involve a logical contradiction. And so God would be able to create a universe where it's just empty space, or where there are nothing but dead planets, and there's no one for God to reveal, let's say, the Bible to. So God's not required to reveal the what he told us in every possible universe. That's not mandated by the nature of alternate universes. So God could bring it about that there's a universe where he didn't give any public revelation. That's not a problem. Felix then asks, well, what about something happening in an opposite way to what happened here? And in this part of the question, I think it's a little less clear what Felix means, but he cites the examples of moral laws not applying or applying in the reverse. And I think that's also possible, because the moral law is based on human nature. Based on human nature, humans need to get married in stable unions to raise their offspring, and so that's us. Our offspring are born with freaky big heads that mean, compared to other creatures, that mean they have to fit through the birth canal when they are very immature. They're not like baby deer. You see a baby deer come out, the mother's given birth, plop, here's the baby deer, and within 5 minutes it's up and running around. Well, that's not human babies. Human babies have this freakishly large head that has to get through the birth canal before it gets too big, and that means the overall baby is at a very undeveloped stage compared to other organisms. That means they need intensive care when they are infants, and it takes 2 decades to grow them to maturity. Well, that means that human marriages need to stay together for the sake of the kids for decades, and that's why we have permanent marriages. But that's just humans. If you're an octopus, that's not how it works. The octopuses, actually, to use the correct English plural, they come together, they do their thing, then the male octopus dies, often killed by the female octopus. Then the female octopus lays her eggs, and she kind of hangs around and blows water over them and stuff to make sure they get the oxygen they need. And then when she sees the eggs getting ready to hatch, she dies too. And we actually know it's her seeing them that triggers her death. Because if you blind an octopus, a female octopus, so that they can't see the eggs getting ready to hatch or hatching, the female octopus will go on living. So this is a programmed death reflex in female octopuses. But then once the female dies, those little baby octopuses, they're on their own. Their parents do not stay together for years to take care of them. They're on their own after that. So octopuses do not have permanent, stable marriages the way humans do. That's not how octopus nature works. Well, okay. So God created us to work one way, but he could create another universe where things work very differently, where he made intelligent beings like us on the octopus model, so that, they wouldn't be humans. They might be super intelligent octopuses, but they wouldn't have, stable marriages the way we do. And he could have made us on the dog model. He could have made us on any number of the intelligent aliens in another universe. He could have made them on any model where their nature is different than ours, and so the laws of morality apply to them differently. To give one example, he could create a species that, in order for a new generation to be born, the previous generation must be killed. Okay, not just must die, but must be killed in order for the new generation to be born. Well, in that circumstance, it would be moral to kill old people. If that's the way this intelligent species nature worked, it would be moral to kill their elderly so that the new generation could be born. That would just be how they're built. It is not how humans are built, and so it's immoral to kill old people, humans. But it wouldn't be for this other race that has a completely different nature. There would be certain moral principles of a foundational nature that would remain the same across the universes, namely the principle of love, because God is love. And so love is going to remain a constant in all morality across all universes. But how that love is expressed, do you care for the elderly or do you kill the elderly, is going to depend on the nature that God has given a particular set of creatures.
All right, I'm going to get Felix's second question real quick. If we are living in a simulation with our physical bodies suspended in a hibernation capsule in the base reality, would our sacraments be valid? What if some of us are AI characters within the simulation and just don't know it? Do we still have a soul?
Okay, so in regard to the overall simulation question, I'm going to recommend an early episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. It's episode 17 on the simulation hypothesis. So you can go to mysterious.fm/17 and get more than what I'm going to be able to give you here. But if it's like in the Matrix, where people have physical bodies that are in pods, and they're being fed an imaginary reality, then you could not administer the sacrament of baptism to these people unless if they were in the pod from beginning to the end with no contact with another person. It requires another person to be in physical contact with you to baptize you. And so even if they thought they were being baptized in a mental simulation of reality, they would not really be baptized. Somebody, some intelligent being would have to get into the pod in order to baptize the person. Baptism is the gateway to the rest of the sacraments. And so you can't validly receive any of the other sacraments until you validly receive baptism. Now, I could imagine that there might be some sacraments that you could receive if you had been baptized, like matrimony and possibly confession, because both of those sacraments are information-based. The matter of the sacrament in matrimony is the consent, and we can even get married according to the Catholic Church by proxy. So you could hypothetically exchange consent over a telephone or between pods. Something similar could happen with confession, but the other sacraments, unless you're physically anointed by another human or something like that, the other sacraments would not apply.
Thank you for the questions. Everybody who's sending questions, there were lots more. We'll just save those for another day. Felix, thank you for those last two questions that got to us. Jimmy Akin, thank you. I've enjoyed my 4 hours with you today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
The earlier was recording for later this month, so he can hear that on the feast of...
It'll come up quick as boiled asparagus.
It will, quick as boiled asparagus. All right, that'll do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.